Thank you all very much. Chris, thank you for that very, very generous introduction. I want to thank Chris and the leadership at the NRA. They do a terrific job for us every day fighting for our fundamental rights. Let's give Chris and the entire team a great round of applause. As Chris shared with you, I had the privilege of meeting him 8 years ago when I was first elected to Congress. We've become great friends. I've gotten to know him well. I'm a big fan of him and the entire team here at the NRA. They do a great job in Washington. They do a great job in Louisiana. They do a great job across this country. You know, as I've listened to the speakers up here today, one thought's gone through my mind. As we think about who we elect to office, we need leaders who are thinking not about the next poll, not about the next election. We need leaders who are thinking about the next generation in America. We're here today to talk about American values. And I want to share with you where I've got my appreciation for American values. Like so many of you, it started for me in our house. It started for me with my father, with my mother. Mark Twain said this better than I will. He said, the older you get, the smarter your parents become. If you know what I mean, look, I've got 3 young children. I find myself, I'm becoming more and more like my dad every day. I say things I swore I would never say when I was a child. How many times have you looked at your children and said, because I'm your father, that's why? As long as you're living in my house, you're going to be living under my rules. This is not a democracy. All those things I hated when my dad would tell me when I was a little boy. But you know, my dad would say several things to us that would drive me crazy. I remember when we were young children at the dinner table. When we didn't want to eat our vegetables, my dad would say to my brother and me, he'd say, look, there are starving children in China. You should eat your vegetables. I never understood that. I said, let's send them my vegetables. They can have them. I don't want them. But there was something else my dad would say to me every single day. My dad would tell my brother and me every single day. He'd say, sons, you should get up and you should give thanks to God that you are born in the greatest country in the history of the world. Be grateful that you are Americans. You know, when Dad would say that, I really didn't understand then what he was trying to teach us. The reality is, when you tell that to a child, I'd kind of roll my eyes and think, what else would I be? Of course I'm an American. Everybody I know is an American. But now I'm beginning to understand what Dad was trying to teach me. You see, my parents, they have lived the American dream. They literally came to Louisiana over 40 years ago so that my mom could go to LSU. It was amazing. My dad, he didn't want a handout. He didn't know anybody. He simply wanted a job. He had the confidence. He opened up the yellow pages and called company after company until he could get a job to feed his family. He wanted to live the American dream. Indeed, when I was born, they didn't have insurance to cover me. I was what they would call a pre-existing condition. But you know, back in those days, there wasn't a lot of paperwork or forms. My dad just shook hands with the doctor and agreed to pay the bill every month until he had paid the entire bill. That's how you did things back then. I asked my dad, I said, now, how does that work? You skip a payment on a baby, what are they going to do? Can they take the baby back? He said, son, if they would have taken you back, I would have skipped a couple of payments to send you back. But you know, my dad lived the American dream. 1 of 9 children. Grew up in a house without electricity, without running water. Was the only one in the family to get past the 5th grade. I know I've heard these stories every single day of my life. Did you ever complain to my dad about anything? You tell him you want an allowance, you tell him that life is too hard, all you would get would be a lecture. My dad would say, an allowance? Why should I pay you to do chores? He'd say, how much do you think you should be paying me for the food you eat and the clothes you wear in my house? And if you ever complained about how tough life was, he would tell you, you're lucky. See, apparently when he was going to school, he had to walk uphill to get to school. Then they had to turn around and walk uphill to get home from school as well. They were so poor they couldn't afford downhill, much less school buses back then. Now, the reason I tell you that is every one of us probably has somebody in our family that has lived that story, that has lived the American dream. And really, what my dad, what he wanted my brother and me to understand, he would always tell us this. He'd say, look, there are no limits to what you can accomplish in this great country. He said, I'm not going to give you a famous last name. I'm not going to leave you an inheritance. But I want you to understand this. If you work hard, if you get a great education, there is no limit to what you can accomplish in these great United States of America. And to me, that's the American dream. I think the Occupy guys have it all wrong. They want to teach us about class warfare and envy and taking from others. The American dream isn't that you're entitled to your neighbor's property. The American dream is that if you work hard, you can achieve your dreams. Your children can do even better than you've done. Every generation wants that for our children. You know, the dream that each of us has is the opportunity to excel if we're willing to work hard to achieve our goals. At the core of our nation's soul, it's not words on a piece of parchment. It's not our political institutions. It's not our great natural resources. What is truly at the heart of what makes America great is our people. Our people are the bedrock of our republic. If we rely on each other, and as we continue to rely on each other in our representative democracy to protect the liberties of our friends and neighbors so that our own freedoms may be preserved. That's what it means to be an American. That's why we are an exceptional country. That belief in freedom and the security that freedom ensures is at the core of my political philosophy. It's the reason I've pushed as hard as I can every day to protect our Second Amendment rights, not only in Louisiana, but across this great country of ours. You know, Chris told you about some of the work we did on the bill after Katrina to make sure that never again would law-abiding citizens have to fear their own government coming to their door after a natural disaster to take away their weapons, their guns, so that they couldn't protect themselves, to make sure that we can protect ourselves during a disaster. During my first term as governor, early in that term, we had another opportunity when our legislature was debating the rights of law-abiding gun owners to have their weapons in their cars or their trucks at their workplaces. I'll be honest with you, it was a debate between two friends of mine, two allies of mine. But the reality was, it wasn't a hard decision for me. I told all of my friends that I would take the side of freedom every time. And in Louisiana, freedom won. We passed that bill into law. I want to tell you about a fight we're having right now. We just passed a piece of legislation in our Senate. It is now going to the House. We're in the middle in Louisiana, and here's a challenge for the 49 other states represented here, because I think every state needs to do this. We're going to adopt the strongest, most ironclad constitutional protection for law-abiding gun owners you can find anywhere in the country. It's our own Second Amendment, if you will. It's a new constitutional provision to repair the damage that has been done by misguided judges. I want to share with you the text of this amendment. It has already passed our Senate on a strong vote and is now going to our House. The right of individuals to acquire, keep, possess, transport, carry, transfer, and use arms for defense of life and liberty, and for all other legitimate purposes, is fundamental and shall not be denied or infringed. Any restriction on this right must be subject to strict scrutiny. Now, I'm no attorney. But I don't think even the liberal judges could screw that one up. It seems to me like it'd be pretty hard for even the liberal judges to find a loophole in that language. I'm always amazed. And by the way, unlike our president, I'm not a constitutional attorney. Unlike our president, I've actually read the Constitution, respect the Constitution, but I'm not a constitutional attorney. I'm amazed by a man who is so smart could miss such obvious, clear, black-letter law in the Second Amendment. If I were him, I would ask Harvard Law for a refund of his tuition for whatever he paid for his degree. We are serious about protecting our fundamental rights in Louisiana. Unfortunately, in Washington, our president is just as serious about eviscerating that right. He appointed 2 judges to the Supreme Court who are absolutely dead wrong on this issue. Now consider this. He appointed an attorney general, and you can't make this up, he appointed an attorney general who's allowed guns to be smuggled into Mexico to bolster his case for gun control right here at home in the United States of America. You all know that as Operation Fast and Furious. I think the next operation we need is Operation Fire Eric Holder. You know, I was one of the first and few governors in America to actually call for Eric Holder's resignation immediately after this debacle. I got all kinds of free advice. It's amazing when you do stuff like this. People started calling me up and writing me and emailing me saying, look, Bobby, you're just going to irritate the president. You're not going to accomplish anything. This is above your pay grade. Just leave it alone. Stop picking on this man. Why do you want to make the Attorney General mad at you? Why do you want to make the president mad at you? Well, let me tell you this. Defending our fundamental freedoms is not above anybody's pay grade in America. Every governor, every citizen should feel free to stand up for our rights. It is the duty of every one of us, and I'm going to do it every single chance I get. President Obama's assault on our Second Amendment freedoms is one of the primary reasons we have to make him a one-term president come this November in these fall elections. So often people say this is the most important election of our lifetimes, but this one really is. He is diminishing the economic freedom of every American by raising the debt burden. He is diminishing our Second Amendment rights. His budgets don't stop borrowing. Not now, not ever. They don't solve our entitlement crisis. Not now, not ever. They don't reduce the size and reach of our government. Not now, not ever. This president promised he ran on a campaign of hope and change. Instead, he has given us borrow and spend. I don't know about you. My little girl brought home a button from school the other day. It says, nobody better tell President Obama what comes after $1 trillion. The reality is we can't afford any more of this spending and borrowing. If you look at this president's policies on every issue, from health care to energy to his budgets, every single issue, one thing is crystal clear. He doesn't believe in the transformative and dynamic power of freedom. He doesn't believe we can trust ordinary Americans to make smart energy choices. That's why he funds shams like Solyndra, but he shuts down the Keystone Pipeline. Oh, wait a minute, he's going to let them build it from Oklahoma to Texas. That's great. Somebody needs to buy our Ivy League educated president a map of North America and show him the distance between Canada and Oklahoma to show him where the rest of that pipeline needs to be built. In addition to getting his law school tuition back, he may want to ask Columbia for some tuition dollars back for any geography classes he took while he was there as a student as well. He doesn't believe we can trust ordinary Americans to make our own health care decisions. That's why he wants the government in charge of our health care through Obamacare. He doesn't trust ordinary Americans with our own money, and that's why he's trying to raise our taxes, repeal the Bush tax cuts. And he certainly doesn't believe we can trust ordinary Americans with firearms. That's why he's given us Sotomayor. That's why he's given us Kagan and Holder and dozens of liberal appellate judges whose names we don't know yet, but who pose a serious threat to our Second Amendment rights. You know, I heard somebody the other day say that maybe this president, maybe he's just been such a disaster these first 4 years because of his inexperience. They said maybe it's just he wasn't ready to be president. And it's true, he hadn't run anything before he's president of the United States. I mean, he's certainly been going through 4 years of on-the-job training. But I think that's not quite right. I don't think it's true that he simply wasn't ready. I think the reality is there's a fundamental disagreement in our country today. This election is not about who gives the best speeches or who looks best on TV. I want to be clear about something about our president. Look, I think from TV, he looks like he's a fine husband. He looks like he's a fine father. I really only have 2 fundamental disagreements with this president. There are only 2 things I dislike about this president. One, the fact that he has been the most incompetent president since Jimmy Carter to live in the White House. The second, that he has been the most radically liberal president since Jimmy Carter to live in the White House. You take away his incompetence, his liberal ideology, there's nothing. I mean, the rest of him is fine. Those are the only two things I don't like about this president. But this election is about a fundamental debate. This election is a fundamental choice for America. You're going to hear from the Occupy Wall Street crowd that we're entitled. You're going to hear from that side that it's all about equality of results. You know, nobody in America is entitled to equal results. I hate to tell you this, you're not entitled to your neighbor's property. You're not entitled to your neighbor's car, boat, their property. You're not. Nobody has promised you a fancy vacation. Nobody has entitled you to any of those things. Our side is going to say something very different. You are entitled to equal opportunity. Our philosophy says, no, you don't have a right to your neighbor's car or house or a fancy home or a luxury vacation, but you are entitled to equal opportunity to fundamental freedom. What America is about is this. The promise of America is that your last name, your zip code, your gender, your race don't determine your outcome in this great country. And that's not true in every country in this world of ours. Here in America, we believe that your choices, your decisions determine your outcome in America. That is the reason that everybody in this room defends freedom. And that's the reason that a bunch of brave men and women broke away from England 236 years ago to found this great country. The reason we must prevail, not just in this election, but in this fundamental debate about the future of America, is that it is about leaving for our children more freedoms and opportunities than we inherited from our parents. I want to leave you with one final closing thought tonight. Our greatest asset as a country, the source of our place in history, the provider of our future, it is not our natural resources, as great as they are. It is not our beautiful nation. It is not even our incredible military or our strong economy. The strength of our country is our people. Every great American value, from limited government to religious freedom to free enterprise to personal responsibility to the right to bear arms, is dependent on a people willing to fight for them. We must educate our young people. Yes, we must teach them to read and write, but we must also teach them so they understand our history and the principles upon which this great country was founded. I believe that America should remain the greatest country in the history of the world. By the way, when I was a kid, that was a safe thing to say. We ought to make it a safe thing to say once again. America should never apologize. We should never be content to settle. We should never be ashamed to be the greatest country in the world. I'm proud that we're exceptional. And I know in my bones our role as a global leader must be cherished. Foreign leaders all over this world, they know in their heart of hearts they are safer with a peaceful, with a stronger America. They know that they will enjoy peace and prosperity the stronger that America is. We have a moral responsibility to make our country stronger and unashamedly export our ideals of freedom, democracy, and self-determination to all who would fulfill the divinely inspired potential of every living soul on this planet. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to stand and fight for that freedom. I know you're willing to fight for that freedom. I'm asking you this. I'm asking you to stay in that fight. I'm asking you to stay vigilant. Let's win the hearts and minds of our country this year. Let's not rest until we have won. Let us leave for our children that opportunity to pursue the American dream, as our parents did for us. Let's leave them the legacy that is rightfully theirs. Not a great wealthy inheritance, but rather the opportunity to live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Thank you for having me today. Thank you for the terrific work the NRA does. God bless you. God bless these great United States of America. Enjoy the rest of your conference.